Well, in fact, Krithwin, let me first start away from the very place where we are broadcasting right now. This is going to be the venue of the bilateral meeting that's going to take place between President Joe Biden and the President of Poland, President Duda. Now, what we are seeing just behind me is the presidential palace. Starting around 9 o'clock tomorrow morning is when the bilateral meeting is scheduled. This is going to continue till about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. A series of meetings that are going to take place. Why this meeting becomes extremely crucial is because President Biden, since the time the invasion began, almost a month back, this is the first time that he is his first visit to Europe, number one. And secondly, not to forget the significance of the place that he's basically chosen to come here. That's in Poland. Remember, the maximum number of refugees are in this very place. Poland has been home to several of Ukrainians right now. And President Duda, to a great extent, has extended the support of the country to Ukraine. And almost every place that you see right now, just take a look at this street. This is known as the Royal Route. What you see right now is the kind of support that has essentially been shown by Poland to Ukraine in terms of opening up their own homes so that the Ukrainians can come and stay here. Now, as far as today's to one of the NATO bases where the US troops had come in just after the Russian invasion actually began. So this is an important base on the eastern flank, not very far away from the Ukrainian border. So important to point out here is that this is a significant move that has been made by President Biden to try and rally the kind of support that is essentially that needs to be shown right now to Ukraine. And that's the reason why this comes after a series of meetings that President Biden had, starting from the NATO summit, and then you've had the G7 meeting that had also taken place. So all that put together, it becomes very crucial given the fact that they're trying to send across a message that today Europe stands united with Ukraine. Now, that's the bigger message that perhaps President Biden and several of the other world leaders wanted to send across from that meeting that took place yesterday. As far as the schedule for tomorrow is concerned, where the bilateral meeting is going to take place, let's also take a look at what are the things that one can expect tomorrow when the meeting is going to take place. President Duda essentially wants to send across this message that the world needs to stand united and there needs to be more support that has to be shown right now to Ukraine. So what is it that Europe can do in order to protect Ukraine in terms of the military aid, in terms of opening up their borders for the Ukrainians? All of that becomes a very important thing because right now what you're staring at, Krithwin, is a humanitarian crisis. And that's the reason why several of these European nations, be it Hungary, be it Poland, Romania, all these countries are now opening up their borders so that the Ukrainians can come in and perhaps more support can be given. But over the months, over the days to come, perhaps there are going to be more challenges that these countries are going to face with every fourth Ukrainian trying to leave their own homeland to come and take refuge here. So somewhere down the line, it's going to be very important to see how that bilateral meeting takes place. And today, the symbolic significance of President Biden just few meters away from the Ukrainian border, taking a look at the preparations as far as these NATO bases are concerned. An important announcement by NATO was that they are going to bolster their deployment on the eastern flank, that is in Romania, in Bulgaria. These are the countries where we are given to understand that NATO is essentially going to bolster their deployment.
Shavan, stay on with us. We've cut across to these visuals of the United States President arriving in Poland. So we'll come back to you in just a bit. But yes, Poland, remember, is an extremely important country in what we've seen in the last few days. Also important because it's played a big role all throughout as far as the evacuation process of the Ukrainians out of the war-torn nation is concerned. So if there's one nation that understands Ukraine's torment, it's Poland. And President Joe Biden's visit becomes extremely significant. On your screens, viewers, visuals of US President arriving in Poland and a slew of meetings that are to take place. And Shavan, if I could come back to you on that, as we keep focusing on why this visit is extremely important all through these 4 days, we're also talking about reports now suggesting that perhaps President Joe Biden could also meet President Zelensky. Now, anything that you're picking up on that?
Well, absolutely. There's no information, or rather any confirmation, or whether at all there is going to be some sort of a meeting between President Zelensky and President Biden at this point in time. The only official confirmation has come in with regards to the bilateral meeting that's going to take place here at the presidential palace, where we are reporting right now. This is the very venue of that bilateral meeting that's going to take place around 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and the schedule is still about 2 o'clock. We are not very sure whether at all there is any other specific meetings that President Biden has right now in Poland, but the official version has essentially been that there's going to be a bilateral meeting, and perhaps there is a slim possibility that he could also interact with the media. As far as President Zelensky's message to the NATO summit is concerned, and there, if you remember, very categorically he pointed out that there is much more that the West needs to do at this point in time in terms of military aid. In that NATO summit, perhaps one very significant statement was that he's fallen short of actually asking for that no-fly out zone, because that is exactly the demand that Ukraine has been making right from the beginning of the invasion. But yesterday, in that in that address that he made in the NATO summit, he did not make the mention of a no-fly-out zone, but is essentially seeking for more help in terms of the air defense, in terms of more military aid. Tanks, armored vehicles, more missiles. These are the demands that Ukraine has made, because somewhere down the line, what's very important to point out here is that today, Ukraine realizes that this is a war that they're fighting all by themselves, at least on the ground. There could be, a lot more support in terms of, sanctions that have already been imposed by the West, but that's not going to have the immediate relief that Ukraine is really looking forward to. Because at the end of the day, even for these sanctions to be implemented to a greater extent, it's going to take some time. Take a look at those sanctions pertaining to, gas imports. Even till today, there is a larger export that is going on as far as Russian gas is concerned, and something that Zelensky does understand, that there is a practical problem as far as European nations' reliance on Russian gas is concerned, and that is exactly what Russia is trying to exploit at this point in time. Because for the European nations, especially a nation like Hungary, it's not going to be very easy for them to take a call or completely put an end to importing the oil from Russia. And not to forget, countries like Hungary is actually going to go to polls. All of that, keeping in mind, becomes far more complicated, and that's the reason why perhaps it's going to be important to see how exactly that meeting that takes place tomorrow with President Biden and President Ruda, how does that really work out? Because whether at all, the ammunition, the arms and ammunition, movement of arms and ammunition, will that actually take place from Poland? Because Hungary has refused, for any sort of movement of arms and ammunition. So all that put together, it's a complicated situation. Even if European nations want to perhaps, try and help out Ukraine, there are certain limitations that even European nations are facing at this point in time. So tomorrow, when you see this meeting that's going to take place between the heads of state, it's going to be important to see what are the specifics in terms of the support, or in terms of help that can be provided. Because if you really look at one opening on the western side of Ukraine, it is Poland, and that's the reason why most of these refugee camps here in Poland are completely chock-a-block with a lot of Ukrainians really coming in. You're looking at more than 10 million Ukrainians who have really come in. Let me just quickly show you some more, give you a sense of the area, because that'll give you a sense of this place, and I'll try and explain it for you. This is rather the royal route. On the left-hand side, if you see, these are some of the iconic buildings here in Warsaw, and this is the presidential palace, where this is the venue of the meeting between President Biden and President Duda. As far as his itinerary today is concerned, remember, it's perhaps a message that President Biden wants to send across to Russia also. You're just a few miles away from the Ukrainian border to begin with. Secondly, you're going to those military bases where the US troops are deployed. And these US troop deployment started sometime in the month of February itself, at the time when there was a military build-up from Russia on the other side, from Belarus border. NATO was essentially trying to bolster their deployment, at least on the eastern flank. And that's also an announcement that was made in the NATO summit, that all preparations would essentially be done, at least on the eastern flank, in Romania, in Bulgaria, in Poland also. So all that put together right now, Kritswin, it's going to be a significant meeting tomorrow, and perhaps some sort of a way out that is being looked at by the European nations.
Well, yes, Shravan.